The AW1600 may look and feel a bit like a conventional mixer, but in fact it's a dedicated music recording computer, an all-in-one recording system for both studio and live recording applications. Following in the footsteps of many successful AW products, with which in fact the data is fully compatible, the AW1600 is a sophisticated mobile recording system that incorporates many of the features you'd expect to find on an advanced computer-based application, but in a friendly plug-in and record setting. At the input stage you have 8 XLR TRS inputs with top quality mic preamps and phantom power available on all channels that can be routed to any of 16 individual record tracks. The AW1600 employs 24-bit A to D and D to A's, and if you need additional tone control, you have 4-band EQ on all of your mixer channels. Internally, data is stored on a fast 40GB hard drive, and as a hard disk recording device, you have a whole range of tools at your disposal, from classic Yamaha digital effects processing to time compression and expansion, to functions you'd only expect to see on a complex computer DAW, such as amp simulation and vocal pitch correction. Everyone needs a cast of supporting players at times, and the AW1600 offers quick loop sample containing 250 megs of drum loops and sound effects, and sound clip, using which you can quickly record a piece of inspiration that you can then fly into your song at a later date. Plus, USB 2.0 connectivity, so you can also load in WAV files stored on a personal computer. Once you've recorded your basic tracks, mixing is extremely flexible and forgiving. You can create up to 99 mix scenes per song, and for a dedicated recorder like this, the display is a generous 240 by 64 backlit type, which means you can actually see what you're doing. When your track is complete, the AW1600 has a built-in CDRW for CD burning. Indeed, take it out of the AW and listen to your song straight away on a CD player. Whether you're looking for a mobile recording and playback device for live work, a portable studio, or simply a studio that is not reliant upon a personal computer, the AW1600 cuts the costs without cutting corners. Learning a new piece of equipment is all about getting comfortable, both with the terminology and the physical controls. So let's take a quick tour around the AW1600 and see not only what it's got, but also what Yamaha calls it. At the top is the input section, where you can have up to 8 individual instruments or mics plugged in at any one time. The gain knobs attenuate the level of signal coming in from your sound source. The input select buttons let you see a whole range of associated parameters. Press and hold these buttons to view the information relating to that channel. The Work Navigate section is a kind of mode select area where you tell the AW1600 which of its many different functions and capabilities you want to work on. A song, CD burning or calling up, view the various tracks, edit data, use the AW as a remote controller for external MIDI device, or access the various MIDI and other digital settings. The selected channel controls are a kind of channel strip that applies to any, yes you guessed it, selected channel. The thing you may not appreciate at first is that these knobs are also buttons. Press a button repeatedly and you'll step through all the pages that relate to that parameter. Because the knobs are in a vertical line like a channel strip on a mixer, you may find yourself tweaking them as if they were, say, high, mid and low EQ, etc. They're not though. You select which band of EQ you want to access here, and then adjust always using the same EQ button. The data entry control section is the place your right hand will probably spend most of its time over. The layout is really comfortable too. With your thumb over the enter button, it's easy to manipulate the jog wheel and cursor keys. You'll soon be able to call up your track pages or parts of your song where you need to make adjustments in seconds. Beneath this, the locate section is where you set locate markers, punch in and out points, and access a very handy feature called sound clip that we'll cover later on. Beneath this are the actual transport controls for recording, stop, start, rewind, etc. The faders are in what the AW1600 calls the mixer section. The faders control the monitor or playback level of each track. Finally, two small groups of controls we'll deal with later in more detail are the quick loop sampler buttons, where you can trigger loops and sound effects stored on your hard disk on the fly, and the quick navigate, from where record and monitor settings can be accessed quickly. Then of course you have a nice big display screen. As we said at the beginning, the key to successful use of any piece of equipment is getting comfortable with the controls and the terminology. And here are just a few examples of terminology that might fox you at first. Bypass off. Yes, it's the old double negative. Bypass off is actually on. View. This lets you view the current channel's worth of parameters. Recall. This simply means apply, as in make it so. Find a compression setting you like, you then recall it to apply that setting to a track. Store. It's a pretty obvious word, true, but you do need to do this if you want to, say, keep a customized EQ setting. You need to store your custom setting to any one of the user EQ locations. In order to record on the AW1600, you need to power up and then connect either headphones, here, or speakers, here, from the monitor outputs to either your powered monitor inputs or the inputs of your power amp, if you're using a separate amp and speakers, in order to hear what you're doing. You can connect all manner of devices, from line-level synthesizers to microphones to guitars and basses direct using the Hi-Z input. You can even connect, as in load, phrases and samples from an accompanying disc or indeed your computer, and we'll come on to that later too. For the moment, we're going to keep this nice and simple. Here is a beat created on the Motif ES, and we're just going to patch the motif into channels 1 and 2, create a new song, and record a few minutes of it. The motif is a line-level source, and so can be patched in using a simple instrument cable. Raise the stereo fader to 0, and then press and hold the input select button and adjust the gain so that it's peaking at between -6 to 0 dB. For now, we're going to use the quick navigate record button to access the direct page. Press the input select buttons for the incoming motif channels, raise those channels faders to 0, press record and play. There's a lot more to the recording process, of course, and in the next scenes we'll be recording and overdubbing several tracks worth of music. But if your brain is now aching and you want to call it a day, don't forget that the AW1600 is actually a computer. Don't just yank out the power. Go through a proper shutdown routine in order to preserve your data safely for your next adventure. In video 1, we looked at the AW1600 terminology and basic principles it uses for recording. Now it's time to do some recording for real. In this video, we'd like to get you to the point where the basic procedures become almost second nature, letting you just focus on your music. Sound can get into the AW in a number of ways. Line-level devices like electronic keyboards can be plugged straight in using 1/4-inch jack cables. You can plug a guitar straight in too, but you might find it's a bit dull. So if you don't have an external preamp, you can use the special Hi-Z input jack to brighten up the signal. These jacks at the back are also capable of accepting XLR mic cables. Basic mics will be fine plugged straight in, with the input knob set to mic instead of line. More sophisticated mics may require phantom power, and this can be switched on for any input. Purely for the purposes of demonstration, we're going to use all of these different input options for this recording. We're going to be creating a new song, so press the song button and give it a name. We have a stereo drum loop on the Motif ES, so we'll take the left-right line-level outputs from Motif and connect them to inputs 1 and 2 on the AW. Recording is all about balance, and part of the balancing act is getting as much clean sound recorded as you can, so that you're only dealing with the sound you want to record, not rumbles or background noises, or worse, distortion, unless of course that's the effect you're going for. And stage 1 of this process is maximising the level of signal coming out of your sound source, in this case Motif. So up goes our master fader on Motif. Right, so which tracks on the hard disk do we want to record this onto? The AW is completely flexible in this regard, but for now let's make it simple and record inputs 1 and 2 to tracks 1 and 2. Press the record button in the quick navigate area and you'll see a number of options. Direct is option number 1, and this is the one we're looking for. Direct simply assigns inputs to tracks, and by pressing the track 1 and 2 buttons you can now actually see that this connection has been made. To see what level is actually going to be recorded, press and hold the input buttons until this screen appears. Now, the meters will tell you if you need to increase the level or decrease it. You're striving for a reading somewhere between -6 to 0 dB. Drums have naturally spiky signals called transients. No, not homeless people. So make sure the loudest hit isn't putting the level way over the top. Now we need to explain a very important concept. So if you're cooking dinner while listening to this video, please stop doing that and pay attention. The concept is the difference between the level of an instrument being recorded and the volume of that instrument that you're actually hearing right now. We set a good level just now, but we can actually adjust the volume of what we're hearing right now using the sliders. Moving these up and down will not affect the level of what's being recorded. Why? Because the sliders are just controlling the level of signal that's coming from the hard drive. So to recap, adjust the level of what's going to be recorded using the input knobs, adjust playback volume using the sliders. Right, end of crucial concept section. Let's go into record by pressing play and record together and fire up the motif sequencer. Fantastic. Let's hear that back. Rewind to the beginning of the track and press play. That was pretty painless because the motif drum track didn't require anything fancy by way of EQ or effects, and it doesn't make mistakes. One-take wonders, that's what we call them. Now we'd like to record some bass guitar played by a somewhat trickier machine called a bass player. We're going to come straight out of the bass into the AW using a high Z input. This is coming in on input 8, and we can route this to anywhere we want. Let's send it to track 3. At this point, note that our drum to input track assignments are still in place, and we don't want to record over those tracks next time we go into record, so we'll break that connection. As always, make sure we're getting good level coming in from the instrument, and bass generally benefits from a little compression, which is an effect that smooths out some of the peaks and troughs and makes your performance a bit more solid. We're going to look at effects in detail in video number 5, but for now let's quickly go into the effects library and apply one of the AW's compressor presets especially designed for bass. We can now go into record. You can adjust the level of what the player is hearing, in terms of both himself and the tracks that we've already recorded, on the sliders. Again, this will not have any effect on what is being recorded, just the playback. That's great. For guitar, we're miking an amp. The mic is plugged into input 4, and we're going to record it to track 4. Here, we already have pretty much the exact sound we want coming out of the amp, so we won't change anything by way of effects. That's good. Finally, let's record some vocals. Again, a mic is plugged directly into one of the inputs, number 5, and since this is quite a sophisticated mic that needs additional power, we're going to switch phantom power on. Although there's a lot of fine-tuning you would normally want to do on a vocal track, for the moment we're just going to add a little bit of compression to get a smoother level, and because singers generally like to hear their voices in as flattering light as possible when they sing, we're going to add a touch of reverb. Now, the reverb we're adding is only being applied on playback. This is not actually being recorded. Again, effects and the different ways to route them is covered in more detail in video number 5. Okay, for now we have the beginnings of a nice track. So far we've simply shown a recording process of one section of a song, and everything that's been played has been played perfectly every time. Oh, that life was so simple. In reality, a song is made up from several sections, and people do often make mistakes. Here are some recording tools that the AW1600 offers to make these realities a little less irksome. Markers. A marker is just a reference point, where the chorus starts, the beginning of the bridge, or a breakdown. And setting these signposts throughout the duration of your song will definitely make life easier when it comes to recording overdubs, editing or mixing. You can set a marker point in real time as your song plays just by pressing the mark button at the desired moment. The mark point can be changed by pressing song and cursoring over to point, where you can now view your mark points. Use the cursor and jog wheel to make the changes as you need them. Markers can also be created by looking at the actual waveform. Press Track, View, cursor over to Wave, and then press Enter. Toggle to select the precise moment that you want to set the marker. At the top of the screen, beside the counter, you can keep an eye on which mark point you're at. S stands for Start, E for End, and between these two positions the mark points are numbered in order. The Locator facility lets you specify sections of your song in which you'd like to do something. Oh yeah? Such as what? The first would be a section in which you'd like to record, but don't have time to hurl yourself over to the transport controls every time you want to punch yourself in and out. You'd like this to happen automatically. And you can. Setting locate points is a bit like setting your alarm clock. Press and hold the Set button, and then press your in and out points at the relevant moments. You can even use the markers to locate these locate points. If you're going to be punching in on a track, you might want to rehearse this a few times before taking the plunge. No problem. To practice, have auto punch on, but just press the play button, in which case the LED will blink. And to do it for real, have auto punch on, and then press play and record together. The LED will then go solid. Secondly, you might want to loop a section of your song so that you can practice a part or maybe experiment with an effect. Basically, it's the same process as for setting the in and out point, except you press A and B to define the section that you want to repeat. To activate the repeat, just make sure the repeat button is on during playback. As we say, mistakes can be made of course, and the undo button can be a real pal. If any manoeuvre on the AW can be undone, the undo button will be lit. Press undo to undo the last thing you did and now wish you hadn't. Press and hold the undo button and you'll find a 15-layer undo history. Highlight the thing you did earlier in the day and now wish you hadn't, and then hit enter. Finally, in our recording toolkit are the virtual tracks. In Track View, cursor over to VTR. As you can now see, the track has 8 virtual tracks associated with it. These allow you to record up to 8 alternate takes, if you like, on a track, and then choose later which one you like the best. A solid circle shows you which virtual track is currently being played. You can only hear one at a time, and you can't switch between virtual tracks in real time. There's a lot to take in here, so a good idea is probably to do a few dummy recordings that make use of all these techniques and features we've discussed until you're comfortable with the process before letting yourself loose on a real song. All-in-one portable recording devices are the perfect things to use for recording rehearsals or even live gigs. In these situations, time is very seldom on your side. You need good quality recordings with some degree of separation so you can polish and tweak and possibly even repair stuff later on, but you don't have hours to set everything up. The goals are speed now and flexibility later on, and luckily that's very much the AW1600 philosophy too. Here's a typical rehearsal setup. Instruments in close proximity and a small PA mainly for vocals, but that could also handle keys or acoustic guitar. If you do want to do more than simply stick a boombox in the centre of the room, multi-channel recording is the name of the game. You'll need a few mics, not only for vocals and possibly guitar, but also so that you have some control over the drum balance. You may also want 1 or 2 DI boxes so that bass, or possibly even guitar, can be heard through their own amps but also recorded direct. Aside from these, the AW1600 covers pretty well everything else. The 1600 can handle up to 8 inputs at a time, at line or mic level, with phantom power available on all channels. The 1600 makes routing a breeze since channel 1 defaults to track 1, making it very easy to keep an eye on where everything is. We need phantom power on the drum mics. Kick and snare and a couple of overheads are quite sufficient for this purpose, so just switch phantom power on for these channels. Bass is coming in from the DI box on channel 4. The guitar is being mic'd and coming in on channel 2, and the vocal and acoustic guitar mic is coming in on channel 1, and then going straight onto the PA from this direct output. The keys are doing the same, but are coming in at line level. Now everything is patched in, it's time to set your levels and make any adjustments to the sounds in terms of dynamics or EQ. Some instruments benefit a lot from compression or limiting on input. You don't want to have to worry about distortion or low-level signal when you're playing live for maybe a few hours at a range of different intensities, depending on what song you're playing. And the AW1600 not only offers individual dynamics processing on all the channels, which is a huge money-saving feature, but also has a whole library of preset dynamic settings that you can call up in seconds. And they're really good. Here's something just to quickly tighten up the kick drum. And here's something to make the bass a little bit more solid. You can also add a little discrete EQ, i.e. per channel, if you want. Everything needs to be recorded, but you don't need everything blasting out through the PA, the drums for instance, so just turn down the channels for the instruments that you don't want to come out through the PA. When you're playing live, a lot of people like to hear an effect such as reverb or delay on their voice. It can help everything fit together, give it some polish. All well and good, but if you're making a recording, you don't want to be stuck with that reverb or delay. You'll probably want to spend a bit more time finding a better setting when you're mixing the performance later on. The AW1600 is way ahead of you. 2 global effects processors, where you can find a whole range of excellent live effects, will be heard just fine, both live and on playback, but the effects will not actually be recorded to hard disk. Back in the studio, after the rehearsal or show, you can then print the exact same effect if you like, or spend a bit more time experimenting with different effects or settings before you master to stereo. In a rehearsal, or especially on a live gig, you're going to want to record and be able to access several different songs in a set. And there are 2 ways to go here. Either you can set markers as you begin each new song or take, or you can create a new song and import a scene, which is a handy snapshot of all your settings. That choice will probably be down to whether you're conducting the recording and playing yourself, or if you have an engineer doing this for you. When the rehearsal or gig is over, don't forget to save your data and power down properly so that when you're preparing for the mix, everything is where it should be. One final feature that could be a real lifesaver for live recordings is the virtual track concept. Each track actually has 8 virtual tracks associated with it. So if the guitarist plays a clam, or the singer sings the wrong words at some point, you can actually go in and repair parts when you're safely back in the studio using virtual tracks. Speed of setup without sacrificing options is the name of the game for a successful live recording, and that's just what the AW1600 gives you. These 4 pads under the heading Quick Loop Sampler are probably some of the first things you prodded when you fired up the AW1600. Yamaha provides a selection of loops and sound effects on this accompanying CD, and in fact these are preloaded on the hard drive, and they can be viewed and recalled from the sample edit library pages. Having a selection of audio drum loops you can trigger manually can be really useful. And there's more. You can import your own material, drum loops or even non-loop sound effects if you want. Plus you can record quick loop sampler material into a song, either in real time, i.e. with you hitting the pads as the song plays, or in step time on a grid. You can beat map, you can edit the samples, and you can add effects. Each pad can store 4 banks of loops marked A, B, C, D. In setup you can see what's stored currently. If it's a loop, you can see the BPM. Plus, if you want to use a different portion of the loop, you can do that from here as well. So how do you load in new sounds? Well, you can do that in one of 3 ways. From a CD inserted into the AW itself, via a special folder called Transport if you want to pull a WAV file off your PC, or you can take a portion of a track you've already recorded and use that as your source material. You can load audio straight off a CD, or you can load in a WAV file. If you want to load a loop, you need to be aware that the AW treats everything as a 1-bar loop. The ramifications of this are not critically limiting, but if you want to load in, say, a 2-bar drum loop that's playing at 120 BPM, the AW will play it fine, but you'll see it as a 1-bar loop at 60 BPM. First, make sure the AW is set to digital record on in the utility pages under D in HDD. Now with the CD loaded, press Edit and highlight CD Import. Cursor to Read CD Info and hit Enter. Cursor to the WAV file field and then use the jog wheel to find the file you want to load. Finally, choose a pad and bank location and then cursor to exec to execute the operation. What can we do now? Tempo is an ever-present concern when working with audio loops, and the AW offers the choice of letting a loop play back at the tempo it was recorded, or it can sync to the tempo of your current song. When you're stopped, or you don't yet have a song loaded, Monitor mode lets you experiment with the beat mapping slice parameter, and you can hear how the AW is able to stretch or shrink the speed of your loop. If you want as natural effect as possible, you're better off speeding up a loop rather than slowing it down. If you're working on a song, make sure you keep slice on, and then the loop will automatically sync to the song's tempo. Here's a loop being played back at its originally recorded tempo of 120 BPM. You can alter the tempo manually, or the tempo can be synced automatically to the tempo of the current song. In this instance, we're calling up a song that's at 140 BPM. Yay, magic! If you want to add effects to a loop, simply press the Effects button and apply the amount of effect you want. These are the same two effects processors that are available to any input or track on the AW. So how do you record pad hits? Actually, you record pad performances. In other words, you simply record a series of note-ons which in turn trigger whatever it is that's assigned to those pads. From the quick navigation section, toggle the Record button to Pad. You can now see on the screen whether each pad is set to one-shot or loop mode, and whether it's in record or playback status. Repeatedly pressing Enter over the status icon lets you call up the Record option. Set your levels using the pad channel faders, which you'll find in the View window under Fader, and you're ready to record. You can also record pad note-ons in step time using this grid. For playback, just make sure you return each pad to its playback status. If you want to take a snippet of audio you've already recorded on the AW and turn that into a pad sample, go to the Quick Loop Sampler section and toggle through Sample Edit to TR-IMP, Track Import. Now it is simply a matter of selecting which track and which region of that track you want to use and choosing a pad destination. Editing is the process of adding to or altering the material that you've recorded. Effects are part of this process since their job is to enhance or change the appearance of a sound. This is an important stage in recording since it prepares all the various instrumental and vocal parts for the mixing stage. You can think of it almost as a pre-mixing stage. The AW1600 is not a personal computer, but it does have many powerful and very computer-like capabilities. On a basic track management level, you can erase data, copy it to another location, move it around. The process is essentially one of defining exactly what slice of music you want to do something to, i.e. define its location and its start and end point, and then issuing instructions. If you know the exact timing of material that you want to edit, you can do this by entering in the data numerically. But you can also edit data direct from the waveform, much as you would do on a powerful computer-based editing program. On a drum track, say you have one or two late snare hits, and you don't want to re-record the entire drum track. You can then look at the waveform, identify those late hits, and then correct their timing. Go to Track View and then hit Wave. Toggle over to Time, and set the amount of the wave that you're looking at so that you can identify the parts or part that you need to edit. Toggle to Listen, and then hit Enter in order to hear that portion of the wave. Isolate the offending snare hit by highlighting the counter, and then using the jog wheel to find that exact hit. Hit the Edit button, toggle to Move, Insert your marks and then slide the snare hit to where you think it should be. Exec will execute the process. Sometimes you'd like to change the timing of an entire track, and the AW offers a time compression expansion feature that can speed up or slow down the tempo of a track without affecting the pitch. Go to Edit and toggle to T-Comp. Again, specify the region that you want to edit, and then experiment with the ratio parameter until you have the result you need. This is expressed as a percentage. 120% of the original makes the wave 20% longer, so the effect will be for the track to play back slower than the original, but still maintaining the same pitch. Timing is one thing, how about the pitch? The AW1600 also has a pitch change effect, which lets you alter the pitch of some audio without speeding it up or slowing it down, and this works in exactly the same way as the T-Comp does over timing. If you want to get even more detailed pitch editing, the 1600 also offers a tool called Pitch Fix, which is something you normally only see on a dedicated DAW. First, let's hear the problem. Ooh, yes, that ooh is way flat. When you're using Pitch Fix, you first need to set up an auto punch-in region, because what you're doing is actually processing the audio and then bouncing it over to a new track. In Work Navigate, go to Record, then Bounce. Highlight Pitch Fix and press Enter. Choose which track contains the passage you want to fix, and then choose a destination track for the corrected version. In the Pitch Fix window, you have 4 processing parameters to set. Detect governs how sensitive to pitch fluctuations you want to be. The higher the number, the more sensitive it'll be. The Rate parameter governs how speedily pitch correction will actually take place. Formant controls the vocal's frequency and character, and Pitch Up or Down is the fine-tuning amount of pitch correction to be applied. The keypads corresponding to the 12 notes of the scale are very useful for specifying a single note or indeed scale that you'd like pitch correction to adhere to. If you have a single note that should have been, say, an A, but was flat, you can just highlight that note in order to convert your flat A straight up to pitch. Detect and Rate parameters will repay experimentation. Essentially, a lower rate value produces a smoother, more natural result, as you can hear. On the other hand, if you want that robot voice synthesizer effect, then set a higher rate value. Once you've made your settings, make sure the source and destination track faders are up around 0 dB, make sure your auto punch is on, and then hit play and record. Remember, the record light will only go on once you get to that specified in point. Having cleaned up your tracks and fixed any problems, you'll probably want to enhance certain tracks with effects. The AW1600 offers you a fully professional range of effects processing, from dynamics and EQ that you may have already used when you made the initial recording, to reverbs and delays that you want to apply now as you head towards the mixing stage. Each track on the 1600 can use dedicated dynamics and EQ settings, as we saw in Scene 2 when we recorded the basic tracks. You also now have 2 global multi-effects processors that contain a great many effects, from distortions to reverbs to delays. Both offer effects libraries of preset settings, while still offering full editability if you really do know the result you're after. Let's look at the dynamic settings that we chose for the bass player in Scene 2 and see what could have been done to customize that. EQ is a very specific editing tool, and each AW track has its own 4-band EQ processing to play with. Once everything is sounding pretty much as you'd like, you may want to explore spatial effects such as reverbs and delays. Armed with 2 multi-effects processors, each track on the AW can apply its own level of effects that you set up here. And again, there are plenty of excellent presets to choose from, plus you can freely edit the effects and store them in the user effects library if you need. There are 2 ways of viewing your effects. The first is at the individual track level. Press the View button and toggle through to Channel View. Here you can see all of that track's effects levels and assignments. Alternatively, if you press the Effects 1 or Effects 2 button, you can see all of the AW's tracks at one time, plus the amount of effect that is currently being applied to each track. Repeated pressing of the Effects 1 and 2 button lets you see options in terms of View, i.e. view the library of effects from which to make a selection, Edit, i.e. go into the effects edit pages, and Send, i.e. check the amount of effect that's currently being applied. Looking at some of the effects edit pages, you can see the incredible power that you have at your disposal here. As you can see and hear, the AW1600 offers an incredible amount of editing and processing power in all departments, from the management of your basic tracks, to pitch and timing correction, to the application of world-class DSP effects. The beauty of the AW1600 is that while it has plenty of computer-like features and functions, it is not a PC. It's a standalone hard disk recorder with dedicated controls for making and processing music. However, there's no denying that personal computers can have almost unlimited power for processing and data storage if you have a sufficiently powerful PC plus the appropriate programs at your disposal. So, very sensibly, the AW1600 does allow you to move data back and forth to and from a PC. Why do you need to do this? Well, for archiving, when you want to save your data externally for safekeeping, possibly for external editing, when you have, say, a special effects plugin you'd like to use on a particular sound or track, or just for file transfer, if you're using the AW1600 to make your initial recordings, but want to now move the entire project over to a software DAW like Cubase SX3 for your editing, mixing and mastering. To export files to a personal computer, which can either be a PC or a Mac, you first need to export them to a special area of the AW1600's hard drive called the transport folder. The transport folder is a kind of holding bay for files, both if they're being exported from the AW1600 or if they're being re-imported back in. You won't actually see this folder on the 1600 itself, but on a USB-connected PC, you will be able to view the AW1600's hard drive containing the transport folder from My Computer, on a USB-connected Mac, directly from its desktop. Files you want to export are actually copied into the transport folder. Press Edit and cursor down to Export. Choose which track or tracks you want to export. The default is track 1, which is just that, track 1. But you have a lot of options here, from a single track with a particular virtual track specified, to pairs of tracks, the stereo track, or everything on tracks 1 to 16 as a complete set of individual mono tracks. Note you don't have the option of specifying a virtual track on that option. Set the start and end points that you want to export. Having set up the data you want to export, cursor over to Execute and press Enter. If you're transferring individual files, you might want to rename or name them as Dave's Vocal or Bass Repair, as opposed to having a random track 1 wave floating about. But if you're exporting all tracks in a song, then a folder with that song's title will be created automatically, and inside of this you'll find the individual tracks 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., which should then work fine. Once everything is set up, press OK, and the export will begin. Depending on how much data you're exporting, this can take a few minutes. Now you're ready to connect your personal computer. Here we're using a PC. Press Utility, then cursor over to USB, hit Enter, and the connection will be established. As you can see, the AW1600 shows up as 2 drives because the AW's hard drive is partitioned. Look in the transport folder, and now you'll see your song and the files in them. Warning: do not rename any file on the PC other than those in the transport folder. If you do, the AW will no longer be able to find them. Only rename a file that you've copied over to your computer's hard drive. When you're finished with the export, you can remove device on the computer, and then on the AW1600 hit cancel. It will ask device removed on PC, and you'll be safe in saying OK. We've just shown you how to transfer files over to the PC. If you want to re-import a file back into the AW, having worked on it externally, place the edited file back into the transport folder on your PC, and then go through the import routine. From Work Navigate, press the Track button, and then cursor to Wave IMP, and then specify precisely where you want that file to land. Being able to finish a song is one of the great problems of the digital age, because digital products offer you what seems like a limitless array of recording and processing options. After a while, the best thing to do is to make yourself finish a track, mix it, master it, burn it to CD, play it at home or in your car, learn from it, and then move on. The whole process of recording is an inherently tricky business, and it doesn't come much trickier than the mixing and mastering stages. Mixing is the process of balancing the relative levels of your multi-track recording, adding effects like reverbs and such, and then funneling the results of these labours into a stereo recording that you can burn onto a CD and listen to out in the real world. In the old days, you'd take a multi-track recording and mix it down to stereo on another tape machine, or onto something like DAT. On the AW1600, the stereo track is actually internal. Here are 3 songs already mixed and ready to go, stored on the actual hard drive. You can have up to 8 stereo track mixes per song, as you'll be able to see in the CD burning video. Mastering is the final polish stage, where your mix can get one last piece of processing before your adoring public gets to hear it. More on this in a minute. First, to the mix. A good habit to get into before you start balancing is cleaning up any extraneous noises on your tracks. Listen to each track in turn and edit out that, say, sniff before the singer started singing, or the noodling about that the guitarist did before he did the solo. Here, we just need to lose what the guitarist played between 2:35 and 2:39 before he started soloing. Simply specify and erase the data between these points in time, and you're all set. Now is also a good time to bounce like-minded parts recorded on several tracks onto a stereo pair, a percussion bounce for instance. Here we have congas on track 3, clave on track 4, and a shaker on tracks 11 and 12. From the record menu, toggle to bounce, input your destination tracks at the bottom of the screen, and then choose your source tracks by toggling to the track listing on the top of the screen. Press enter until the desired destination is connected. Either it bounces to both stereo tracks or just to one or the other. You can set up different pan positions here. And you can set up the relative percussion mix using the track faders. And these can be adjusted in real time as the bounce goes along, if you like. Now raise the stereo fader and the fader for the destination tracks, and you're ready to record. With everything nice and clean, pull down all the track faders and raise the stereo fader to 0 dB. It's probably a good idea to have the meters set to post, which will help you keep an eye on the track levels going to the stereo track. Press the View button until you see meter, then make sure Post is highlighted. A lot of people like to start with the rhythm instruments to make sure the basic groove feels right. Raise the level of your drum track so the main meters are reading somewhere between -12 to -6 dB. You don't want the drums to be so loud that you have no headroom for the other instruments and vocals. Your ultimate goal for the whole mix is around 0 dB showing on the left-right meters. Unless your music is based around effects, effects from reverb to EQ are really best used sparingly. If a sound doesn't need to be EQ'd, don't EQ it. The skill, of course, lies in knowing when a sound needs adjustment or enhancement. Making each individual sound as complete and full in itself is not necessarily a good idea if that sound is only ever heard in context. If you put too much top, say on a bass guitar, like this, it might start to interfere with the guitar part, or the keyboards, or even the vocals. In the final mix, bass is almost always best when it lives in the lower part of the frequency spectrum, leaving other instruments to do their job without any sonic interference. The AW has a huge library of processing effects, of course, and you'd really need to be a true minimalist not to want to try some of these out. Let's look at some of the options we could put on the lead vocal.
Nobody else could move my heart out so like you do.
As with so much in a mix, don't be afraid to experiment until you get the groove or sound that appeals.
Deeper than any ocean, you're the only one that can make my dream.
Scenes are snapshots of a whole host of AW1600 settings, from channel status to levels, effect settings, that can be stored and then recalled automatically as your song plays back. The scene concept lets you undertake some complex mixing maneuvers, some tricky panning, individual track swells or fades, calling up an effect you only need to use once in a song, say, and then store it. In other words, you don't have to perform that maneuver in real time. Set up the effect you want, then press the scene button once, scroll through to a free scene location, you've got 1 to 99 here, and select the store key. You can name a scene, verse 3, lead, etc. Once you've done this, you now need to tell the AW when you want this scene to be recalled, which you do in the tempo track. Press the song button, go down to tempo, then new. Then enter the location and other data in this screen. If you need to make a minor change to a scene, you can save yourself the bother of re-entering the timing on the tempo track. Make your edits, press scene and cursor over to library, then cursor to the scene name and number you want to edit and hit store. Now, when you're given the option to retitle, simply press OK, i.e. don't change the name. In the days before computer control and mix automation, a mix was a real-time, genuinely hands-on procedure. If your tools are solely in software, say a DAW like Cubase or Nuendo, then a mix can be planned and executed step by step with no real-time mix as such taking place. The AW1600 kind of straddles both camps. You can set up tricky parts of your mix as a series of scenes, but also it's not a bad idea to leave some moves down to how the moment grabs you at the time, using panel knobs and faders. Once everything is ready, from Quick Navigate press Record until Mixdown is highlighted. Cursor to the Record parameter and press Enter. Rewind to the beginning of your song and press Play and Record together. If you want a fade out at the end, just slowly pull down the master fader at the appropriate speed. Mastering is an art in itself. There are engineers who do nothing else than master other people's mixes before a CD is pressed, and even today they command huge salaries. If you want to experiment with a full range of mastering tools, you're probably best to do this externally using a software program like Wavelab. However, the AW1600 does have a set of mastering effects that can be applied to your stereo track, and these are well worth experimenting with. Press the Record button until you're in Mixdown, then cursor over to Library and press Enter. The mastering library will now appear and you can recall a whole range of specific mastering effects. Mixing and mastering are both arts. There's no single best method or approach. Two final tips, though, are worth passing on. 1. Don't just mix on headphones. Ideally, use not only monitor speakers, but test out your mix on both large and small speakers. The wider range of monitoring systems you use, the more likely it'll be that your mix will sound good on different systems in the real world. Stands to reason, really. 2. Be brave. Better by far to have a mix that elicits a response than one that's safe and bland. If the singer is really good, it's pretty well impossible for a lead vocal to be too loud. Remember, you can always do another mix, but you may only have one chance for a record company or an agent or a publisher to hear your music, so make sure you don't bore them. No matter what your mix sounds like on the AW1600, what really counts is how it sounds on your iPod or on a CD player in your living room. In other words, once you've mixed and mastered your song on the AW, and now have a stereo mixdown of it on the hard drive, you're going to need to burn it, or indeed a whole CD's worth of songs, onto CD. First, a few words about the AW's overall approach to CD burning. 1. A song must first be mixed down to a stereo track before it can be burnt onto CD for external playback. 2. You can have up to 8 separate mixes of a song stored on your hard drive. 3. You can only burn one of these mixes of a song at any one time, so you need to tell the AW which virtual mix you want to burn right now, and you do that from this screen. Press Monitor, select the stereo track screen, and turn stereo track on. A dark dot indicates your currently selected mix, and this is the one that will be burnt onto CD when you add that song to your list. 4. Ideally, use a CDR as your media, although CDRW can be used. 5. CDs are burnt from a list of songs that you access from here. 6. You can have up to 99 tracks on this list, but a total runtime for a CD cannot exceed much more than 75 minutes. The AW gives you 2 choices of how you assemble and burn your material onto CD: track at once and disc at once. If you have one or more completely separate songs that you want to burn onto CD, track at once lets you make a list of them here, and then the AW will automatically put a 2-second gap in between each one. The interesting feature of this method is that you have the option of compiling your track list individually over the course of time. It won't actually finalise the burn until you tell it to. Finalising is something that you will need to do before a CD can be played externally. If you have, say, 5 songs saved as stereo tracks, listed and ready to be burned, just make sure you hit Finalise when prompted in order to complete the process. So why bother with disc at once? Well, say you've recorded a rehearsal or a live gig as one giant long song. Obviously it'd be best to have each song appear as a separate track on your CD. And you do this by setting markers in your song. Every time the AW sees another marker, it'll create a new track on your CD. To view a song's marker, from Work Navigate, press Song, then Cursor to Point and highlight Markers. Make sure you don't set the first marker right at the very beginning of your song, as this is actually governed by the start point that you can see here indicated by an S. The first marker you should need to set should be for the end of your first song. If you ever see a track length too short error message, it's because a marker is specifying a track or song length of under 4 seconds, which it won't allow you to have, and that probably means you have a marker set too close to the start point. Just to be clear, these markers are the same ones that you use when you're recording. Markers can both be viewed and edited from song, point, and if you're using disc at once, it won't hurt to check that there are no extraneous markers lurking. Disc at once lets you compile a list of multiple songs, just like in track at once, but in this mode you have the option of using these markers. The little flag alongside the song name indicates whether that song is going to be using markers or not. Another reason to use disc at once may be that you have a bunch of extraneous noises and stuff at the beginning or end of a song. Only the music located between the start marker and the end marker will then appear on your final CD. So to recap, from CD right, choose disc at once or track at once, highlight the New tab and press Enter. You should now see 01 and the name of a song. Highlight the song and scroll through all available songs to select the one that you want to add to your index. Don't forget to select the desired virtual track, i.e. the mix of the song that you want to use for your CD, from the monitor and stereo track page. In terms of housekeeping, it's best to avoid deleting anything until you've backed it up. You can almost bank on the fact that the track you deleted last week will somehow be crucially important to you this week. Place a blank CD in the unit. Press the CD button and select Backup, and back up your song. A backup is a complete multitrack of the song so that you can later restore it to memory. While on the backup screen, use the data wheel to highlight the song title, move the cursor to Disable and press Enter so that it switches to Enable and a dot appears next to the song title. Cursor over to Execute and press Enter. To remove a song from your hard drive, press Song to select the list screen. Select a song other than the one that you want to delete. You can't actually delete a song that's currently loaded into memory. As one of Yamaha's most experienced product specialists, Phil Clendenin, put it, think of it like this: you can't pull the rug out from under your own feet while you're standing on it. So, either select the default new song, or just create a new song, or load any other song. Then on the list screen, highlight the song you want to delete, move the cursor to Delete and press Enter.